Hi, I'm Matt Collins. I'd like to welcome you to Bob Weber Auto Mart on Douglas Avenue here in Racine, across from Douglas Park. We specialize in 1-year-old, low mileage, almost new cars. And if you'd like to stop by and see them, or see them on our website, bobweberautomart.com, we could save you between $5,000 and $10,000 on your next almost new car purchase.
Welcome back to another edition of Sports Junkies. My name is Gery Woelfel, at least the last time I checked it was, upon further review. And I'm from the Racine Journal-Times, and joining me today is Jim McIlvaine, the pride and joy of Racine,
One of
Wisconsin.
many prides and joy.
You're one of my bigger pride. You know what? If we had a Mount Rushmore of Racine, guys, you'd be there, right at the top.
Yeah, I was on Jay Moore's show a couple of weeks ago when they were talking about
Nice.
Mount Rushmore. Well, yeah, except they were talking about the Death Valley of NBA draft picks. And I countered, and Jay supported me. He said, you were a second-round draft pick. I don't know how any second-round draft pick can be in the Death Valley. And I said, there's a lot of guys that should have made the NBA that didn't. And
absolutely.
I would consider bigger busts than me because they squandered great opportunities. And even some guys who did get drafted, and you can't say Len Bias on a show like that. Right. Len Bias.
But you can say it here on
you can
Sports
say it
Junkies.
here. Len Bias, and he should be mentioned because
Absolutely.
it was a terrible thing that happened to him, and people should be reminded that you can throw away everything that anybody would ever want in life and more just by using drugs. So.
Oh, absolutely. We're going to have a segment later on the NBA and the Milwaukee Bucks, but this topic is going to be on college basketball. And you are one of the broadcasters for Marquette University games, and
I am.
You have the misfortune of working with Homer on a game-to-game basis. And just kidding, Homer.
I enjoy it.
We love you. Hey, before we get into that, though, let's do some catching up. You've been out of basketball now, about 12 years? Somewhere in that ballpark?
Yeah, 11, 12 years.
What are you doing these days? Obviously,
I do the Marquette games.
You do Marquette games, we know that.
I'm not totally out of basketball.
No, you're not.
I go to a lot of St. Cat's games. My son's on the JV team.
Yeah. How's he doing?
He's doing fine.
What's your evaluation from a NBA scouting aspect here?
He just needs to work more on his game, and we're going to do that this summer. I just signed him up the other day for 5-star basketball camp. I'm not a big believer in the AAU system. I prefer to have him go to skill camps and work on developing skills and play against good talent at those camps rather than chasing them around and spending thousands of dollars all summer long and ignoring the rest of the kids and the family and my wife in the process.
There you go. Yeah, I had a chance to see him play twice, and the one thing that stood out right away is fundamentally he's really good. I mean, he's got a good foundation there. So best of luck going forward. But talking about Marquette here, obviously they lost some very good players last year, and you thought, well, maybe they're going to have their struggles this season, but they've had more struggles, I think, than the average fan expected. Yeah. What do you kind of attribute that to?
Personnel missing that I think people didn't anticipate were going to be missing. Jamil McKay transferred before the year really started. Dwayne Wilson went down with an injury. Right. And again, as a freshman, you don't know how much he's going to help you. Expect Jamil McKay would have made a difference. Right. And then obviously Vanderblue leaving a year early probably set us back the most because he was the most talented player. He's a known quantity. We knew he was the best player on the team and would have helped us, but there's not anything you can do about that. And people say, oh, it was a terrible decision by him. He shouldn't have done that. We're not Vanderblue. We don't know what was going on in his life, whether he had family pressures or something else that was going on. That he felt he didn't really even have a choice maybe when he decided to leave, where some people think it's as easy as saying, well, you can either stay or you go. It's not always that simple.
I totally agree with you. You know what made this Marquette season kind of interesting, at least from my perspective and to a lot of people around here, is that there are two Racine kids, not only on the team, but they're starters, and to the best of my recollection, that has never happened. Yeah. And I really doubt if it will ever happen again. I think it's just very unique that you have two players from a relatively small town starting at a major program. Jamil's had kind of an up-and-down year. Your take on his play this year?
He's as up and down as his year has been. He's been an outstanding rebounder for us, very consistent in that regard. But it's frustrating because I know the potential is there to see him do so much more. And you see glimpses of it at times where he just starts to take over a game, and for whatever reason, whether it's part of the system or what other teams decide to counter with, he just doesn't do that every night. And maybe it's unfair because Marquette fans are so used to seeing somebody like Vanderblue or a lot of the guys that we've had in the NBA, Jimmy Butler, Wesley Matthews,
Jay Crowder,
Lazar Hayward, all these guys who when they come into their senior year, they're the man. And they take over and they put the team on their back.
Right.
And, Jamil's a great player. He just may not be that kind of player. And he does a lot of great things, and a lot of teams would love to have him on their team.
Absolutely. I've always considered him to be one of the most talented players to not only ever come out of Racine, but of the state. I mean, the guy has incredible skills.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, like you said, I saw him make some plays, and I'm just like, wow, that's impressive. But let me ask you this. You haven't played there. You being a local guy, there's got to be pressure on you. I mean, did you feel pressure when you played there that, hey, I'm not only representing Marquette, I'm representing Racine?
I never really thought of it that way, and maybe it's different for Jamil because he has the perspective of playing at another school versus playing at Marquette, and as does Jake. But I never really felt that hometown pressure. As close as Racine is, when you're involved in a program like that, you feel like you're a million miles away. You never get to see anybody. You get to see your family for 10 minutes after he is like, not like you're in prison, but it's like you're, stationed overseas somewhere where you're always going to school and traveling and playing, and every once in a while you get a glimpse of somebody that you grew up with, but you're so disconnected from the outside world when you're focusing on academics and basketball that I don't know that it really enters into your mind.
Yeah. Going forward, do you think Jamil Wilson, you haven't played in the NBA, I think, for 7 years, 8 years, whatever it was?
7 years.
Do you think he's an NBA prospect, or at least, he's got a chance to make the NBA?
I've never been a good evaluator of how college talent translates to the NBA level. I never thought Chris Crawford would be an NBA player in my entire life. I never thought
he didn't think so either, but
he turned out to be a pretty good NBA player.
He did. By the way, you know who he played against in high school in baseball?
I don't.
He struck him out too. Derek Jeter.
Derek Jeter. Wow.
Yeah, that's pretty impressive.
That's not bad.
Yeah. I'm sorry to interrupt you there.
So, when people ask me, I say, well, the scouts are looking at Jamil, and he's certainly got the body for it. He's got the skill set. He can handle the ball. He can guard on the perimeter for a guy his size. He's got the length and athleticism and all the things that you need. And when you look at a player like Wesley Matthews, he really didn't jump off the page when he was at Marquette. He played with Jerome McNeil, who ended up being the school's all-time leading scorer, who's not in the NBA. He played with Dominique James, who was the most highly touted player in that class, who didn't end up in the NBA. And Wesley just kind of flew below the radar, and next thing you know, he's a stud for the Portland Trailblazers.
Exactly. In fact, after he finished at Marquette, he went to the Portsmouth Invitational in Portsmouth, Virginia. And I saw him there, and this is usually for second-round guys or guys that are going to go overseas. And to be honest with you, he was okay, nothing special. And he didn't get drafted. And all of a sudden, he plays 1 year in the NBA, gets a chance to go wherever he wants. He's a free agent, and look what happened here. So, but getting back to Jamil, I think this guy still has a chance to be a very good player, even at the NBA level. I think he's just too talented, and it's going to be up to him.
The level Marquette's at, I think, does translate into professional basketball at some level.
Exactly.
So whether it's Jake or anybody else that gets significant minutes at Marquette, when you're playing and starting and playing significant minutes for a Big East school, there's a pro team somewhere in this world that wants you when you're done playing at Marquette. So it's a question of, and it's hard because there's only 400-some jobs in the NBA, whether you've got the difference in your game to separate yourself from that crowd of thousands of others to make it to that 400 level, which is really unique and difficult.
Oh, exactly. Now with Jake Thomas, he came from a relatively low Division I school, comes to Marquette, and that by itself, just making the team and being in the rotation, I think is an achievement. But he is now a starter, and let's face it, he had a tough start this year. I mean, he really struggled. But in the last, 3-4 weeks, I mean, he's had some pretty good games.
Yeah, he had the 17-point game against Xavier, And when we came and had Xavier at home, I said, well, they're not going to let that happen again.
Exactly.
Because that can happen for a guy who is kind of not on the scouting report for a lot of teams. All of a sudden he just goes off and has that's on the scouting report for the rest of the season, especially against the team he just did it against. So I would have thought Xavier would have been more keyed into him, but whatever Marquette did to get him the shots in the first game, they did it again in the second game. And Xavier didn't have an answer, and I couldn't be happier for Jake because he had 18 in the second game. So
exactly, because he's faced a ton of criticism from people.
I don't get that. You know, he's a good kid. He works hard.
He's a great kid. His work ethic's incredible.
Yeah,
you know?
and what happens in practice usually translates into minutes in the games, and Jake has demonstrated in practice and then re-demonstrated in games that you need to have him on the court. Not only is he starting, you know, next to Gery Woelfel, he plays about the most minutes of everybody else.
I noticed that. You look at the box score and you think, okay, Jamil or Gardner or somebody else is going to get all, and it's Jake Thomas, 30-some minutes.
Yeah, and it's more about defense, I think, than it is about offense, which should surprise a lot of people and should have quieted a lot of critics, because I think that was the biggest concern people had for Jake when he came to the Big East was, well, he's never going to be able to guard Big East players, but he's proven that he can do that, and not only do that, but do that very well. And that's what keeps you on the court in college basketball. If you can score till the cows come home, that's great, but if you can't stop somebody at the other end, you're a liability. And they're definitely not going to have you in at the end of the game, and they may not have you in for most of the rest of the game, even if you can score a bunch. So
sure.
It's his ability at both ends of the court that has really set him apart and forced Buzz Williams essentially to keep him on the court as much as he has.
Yeah. To make a boxing analogy, Marquette is on the canvas right now. Yeah. The odds of them making the NCAA tournament are going to be difficult. Can they get off the canvas and still get in the tournament?
Absolutely.
You really believe that?
Yeah, they can.
What do they have to do? Win the Big East tournament?
Yeah, they do.
I mean, is that the only way you think they can get in at this point?
I don't, unless they blew St. John. So if they blew St. John's out of the water, they'd have 18 wins.
Right.
They get a maximum of 3 games in the NCAA tournament, or in the Big East tournament.
Right.
So if they win their first 2 games, that puts them at 20. I still don't know if that's enough.
I agree.
And even if they get to that next game and play in the finals, if you get blown out by a team and you were on the bubble and it's like, well, they just haven't ever been able to figure out Creighton if they face Creighton in the finals. That's probably not an NCAA tournament team. So I think they probably have to win the tournament at this point, and I don't know anybody that would disagree with that.
Yeah. Okay, let's go up to Madison to Wisconsin. And there's some people, I mean, at one time I think Wisconsin was ranked 4th in the country. They have since fallen back. Your take on them, and do you think this is one of Wisconsin's better teams? There's some people out there saying, hey, this team could make a serious run.
I do think it is.
You do?
And, you look at a player like Kaminsky, big man, he can play inside, but he can shoot threes.
Yeah, did you see this coming in, Frank Kaminsky?
No.
I mean, it's like, you talk about...
I saw it coming in Frank Kaminsky like I saw it coming in A.C. Earl when he was dropping 40 in the NBA. I didn't see it. Not a bad player.
A.C. Earl, you got to love that.
But not the kind of player that I expected to put up those kinds of numbers.
Yeah.
But he's, kind of like Kevin Pittsnagel or Raggi from Creighton.
Sure.
He's got size, and he can shoot it from 3, and a lot of big guys, even at the college level, just aren't comfortable playing outside like that.
Right.
And so he presents quite a few matchup issues for teams, and he's not the only guy on that team that's a solid player. They've got a really good roster. They got a good bench, and I'm surprised Badger fans haven't been snapping up all the tickets to the NCAA tournament games at the Bradley Center, because they could end up there.
That's quite possible. In fact, I talked to a friend the other day. He said there's very, very few tickets left for the NCAA tournament. I mean, if you want them, they're up in the nosebleed at this point.
I just, if you're a college basketball fan in general, especially, if they were hosting at Wisconsin, I'm a Marquette fan, and I thought Marquette might make the tournament, I'd buy tickets there just to buy them.
Absolutely.
And the first weekend of the tournament's always the best weekend to watch.
Jim, I'd be very shocked though if Wisconsin ended up there, unless they were like a top 8 seed. I just can't see that.
You don't see them being a 2 seed?
I don't.
All right.
But I could be wrong. The thing is, the Big Ten tournament's coming up, and I think that's going to really determine where they go. On a broader scale, some quick hits. Your Coach of the Year, NCAA Coach of the Year.
I don't even
putting you on the spot.
I don't even know his name. The guy from Wichita State.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. That's a great call.
To do what he did last year. I mean, when's the last time they lost a game outside of the Final Four?
Do you think they're for real?
Yeah, they're
you
for
do.
real. Yeah, I don't know if they'll be Butler-esque and make it all the way back again. Right. Because I think this year in college basketball is just too balanced. There's too many. There's not that many elite teams. I'd say there's a lot of really good teams, but everybody's beatable.
Player of the year,
Doug McDermott.
Yeah, he's been phenomenal. You know, it's interesting. I do a fair amount of NBA coverage, and up until a couple months ago, everybody goes, "Oh, middle first round, late first round." I had a scout the other day telling me he had him rated 6th on his NBA draft chart. Right. I mean, I don't think he's going to end up 6th. He'll probably end up around 10 or 12, somewhere in that range. But what a player! Well, you saw him up close.
I did. He's very good, but I also saw Jamil Wilson guarding him.
Yep.
You know, making it really difficult for him to get his shot off. You know, it's not like he scored every time he touched the ball. Right. And Jamil's the type of player that's going to be guarding him at the next level. So for as good as he is and as tough as the Big East is, when you see Doug McDermott play against all these different types of players, I think the scouts, if I were a scout, I would focus in more on the instances where he's playing an NBA caliber player, and they're guarding him defensively to see how he does against that type of player, because that's what he's going to see night in and night out.
Right. This could be the wackiest NCAA tournament I have ever seen. I mean, it's like just take a name out of the hat and they're going to be your NCAA champion. I'm going to put you on the spot here. I'm not going to say who do you think is going to win the NCAA tournament, but give me 4 teams. If you're going to say, okay, these are the 4 teams I think could win it.
I like Duke.
Jabari Parker.
I don't literally like Duke. I don't really like Duke at all. My wife went to Carolina.
That's a good reason not to like Duke.
I think Duke could win it.
Yeah, okay.
If Kansas is healthy, I think they've got a shot at winning it.
By the way, have you seen Embiid play?
Yeah.
What do you think?
Yeah, he's really good. He's really good. I worry about his back, though.
Right.
And you got to be 100% in the NCAA tournament.
I think
it's smart to rest him.
I find this amazing. This kid 3 years ago wasn't even playing basketball.
Yeah.
And his footwork and his understanding of the game is already, very good.
Yeah, he's got tremendous upside.
So Duke, Kansas.
You
got to have a sleeper in there.
I don't know that I do.
Or you'll give you
Arizona.
Arizona.
I think has the potential. I haven't seen as much of Arizona because, basically in college basketball, even though it's been a really good year for the Pac-12.
Right.
If you're not in the Central Time Zone or East, you're irrelevant to most of the country because nobody stays up to watch your games.
Exactly.
But I think Arizona has a chance. I think Florida's pretty good too.
I agree. I like Florida a lot. Your sleeper pick, somebody that's. I'll tell you mine first of all.
Right.
You had mentioned Butler. That Cinderella story. I think Creighton could have that kind of a year simply because they got, like you said, McDermott. That he could carry him deep into the...
I don't think so. If for no other reason than who'd they lose to?
Yeah, I'm not sure.
Didn't they lose... the teams that they've lost to in the Big East, didn't they just lose to Xavier?
Yeah, they've had their struggles, no doubt.
When you're vulnerable like that, and I would point to Villanova the same way. Villanova's a really good team, but they can't figure out Creighton.
There you go.
The other schools will zero in on those losses and figure out what it is,
what their weaknesses are.
And at some point, I think one of the keys, at least for us with Creighton, McDermott's a big focal point of attention, but Rocky just kills us.
Yeah.
And we didn't guard him well enough, or make it hard enough for him to get his shots off. They're going to encounter somebody that's going to make life really difficult for Raggi, and have somebody else that's capable. Maybe it might be a school like Florida that's capable of handling McDermott and at least making it difficult for him.
That is why they are a sleeper. Yeah. But who's yours? Somebody that's nobody's projecting to be a Final Four team.
Nobody's projecting to be a Final Four team.
Florida Gulf International.
Florida Gulf Coast International.
Yeah.
No, how about Michigan?
Hey, that's not a bad call.
Right.
They got some talent.
Yeah, I think they're a talented team, but when you look at the Big Ten, I don't know if they're necessarily the team that everybody points to and says they're going all the way. They're a really good team, but they're not in that national conversation at this point.
There you go. Always a pleasure to be with you.
Yeah. Pleasure's all mine.
Yeah, there you go. Jim McIlvaine, Gery Woelfel, thanks for joining us.